Hi everyone, it's Henry here, and in this video we're going to be continuing our journey with the new plastic Solar Auxilia kits. Now Games Workshop sent us through the battle group box for review, and in this video the plan is to move up from the infantry, which we focused on last video, to one of the smaller vehicles, which is the Sentinel. Now I wanted to do this scheme for the Boremanite Devils, which is kind of the good guys on a lot of the boxes, but loads of you had asked in the previous infantry video about could I do a scheme for the Deathless, which is a cohort that features quite heavily in the Beta Garment campaign, which is what's going on with the books at the minute. So I've put that full process at the end of this video as well. Now everything we're doing here we're approaching with an army painting mindset. You've got a nice variety of miniatures in this force, and you could take forever painting them and they would look incredible. So everything we show here, you can take multiple steps further if you want. But for me, if I was looking at it from I want to get this force on the table looking good as soon as I can, then this is the process that I'd be going through. So I hope you enjoy. Let's paint. So let's take a quick look at the kit itself. Builds pretty nicely, but as with the infantry kit, there are a few mislabeled parts on the sprue, 26 and 27 here, which are to do with the leg assemblies, the sort of thigh bit of the legs. They're just slightly mislabeled, and the way it shows you the part on the instructions has it a certain way around, which doesn't necessarily make it easy to identify. So it's 26 and 27, it's the same parts, they've just been slightly mislabeled on there. For painting, I'm going to leave off the, I don't know what you'd call them, these little armour plates that are on the top of the thighs anyway. I'm going to paint them a different colour to the main body, so they're just going to be blue tacked on. And then the top weapon, the pintle weapon up there, and the two rocket pods on the sides, you can build all of the weapons that come in the kit, which is a bunch. There's like 5, I think, 4, 5, 6, something like that for the top, and 2 different rocket options for the side. You can build them in their entirety and then either magnetise or however you like to attach them to the side of the miniature. So that's it's a nice sort of feature as well, particularly if you're going to be using these for gaming a lot. I'm just going to paint a couple for this video because I'm going to do this in the Boremanite Devils scheme, and I have no intentions of doing a Boremanite Devils army. Now, a lot of the solar you'll see will be the vehicles will have that grey as the main colour, with a little bit of the cohort, the regiment, the Solar Auxilia army, that their colours. Usually in stripes on the tanks, or as you see here on the sort of thigh plate, whatever it's called. I've chosen to use this colour plate, which has more of a sort of tan colour, just because I think it's interesting. And we're going to be painting tanks as well later in the month, so I thought we'll probably address the grey maybe at that point. Now, really important, I didn't prime this model. It was raining, I was lazy. I should have, and it will cause us problems later on. Once it is primed, I'm going to give it a base coat of Thondia Brown. If I was painting it as an army, I would find a rattle can that was a nice brown and use that to prime with. Now for the green elements, and there's not many of them, I'm just going to base coat them using Deathkorps Drab, and then give them a quick highlight using Castellan Green, as you can see here. All the time I'm spraying 25 or 20 to 25 psi, and I'm using a 0.4mm needle and nozzle in my airbrush, and I'm using our Harder and Steenbeck Signature Series Evolution for this. So here you can see it's base coated with the brown. As I say, if you can find a rattle can, do that. 2 jobs in one. Really, really good. Our first highlight colour, we're going to use Baneblade Brown by Games Workshop. Now I've thinned this about 2 drops of sort of normal airbrush thinner, I think it's Vallejo thinner I've got at the moment, to paint, but you just need to adjust that to whatever pressures and environment that you are spraying in. Now I'm not going to go for a very heavily modulated or heavy contrasted scheme here, or light and dark contrast, value contrast on the model. I want to paint this in much more of a traditional sort of military modelling style. So all I'm doing is really following all the different shapes that are on the miniature, and really just leaving that dark brown in the shadows that they would form. So rather than thinking about lighting the whole side of it top to bottom, I'm working sort of each individual shape on there, and I'm just putting a rough highlight on there. It's very, very simple to do this. You don't need to understand really light and dark or anything like that. You're just kind of colouring it in with our airbrush here. I really like the look, and it's something I'm enjoying painting more in this style at the moment. So you can see there, really that darker brown is just left in the sort of recesses, and there's no obvious light source, you know, shining on this model. It's a nice colour, this Baneblade Brown. Baneblade Brown. First time I think I've used it. It was in my pot, so maybe in my bag, so maybe I have I've used it on a model in the past, but I don't recall. And then for a highlight, I'm going to use Rakarth Flesh. Again, thin this a very similar amount. They're a similar consistency of paint, just normal airbrush thinner, about 2 drops of thinner for every drop of paint. And I'm just going to do slightly smaller areas with this. You almost get this sort of mottled effect. That would stand out more if we were doing sort of a vehicle with larger panels on it. Perhaps we'll do that when we come to the tanks later in the month. Now, the really fun bit, or the bit that I really enjoy doing, I'm going to do some oil paint rendering or oil dot filtering, you might hear it called. And I'm going to use, oil paints for that, hence the name. So I'm using Ochre, Industrial Earth, and Buff here. And that's because I want to change the colour of the armour on here. It's a little bit too light, a little bit too desaturated. So I want to add a little bit more green and a little bit more yellow into it. I've got a little dish there of mineral spirits, and then I've got a couple of brushes. One to apply the dots with, and a softer one to move them around. It doesn't really matter where you put the dots, just pop them all over. And the reason I say I've chosen the ochre is to bring just more yellow into that look, to give it more of that tan colour that it seems to have in that panel. So plenty of the yellow dots, or ochre, I should call them, plenty of the ochre dots on there. Then fewer of the industrial earth, which is this sort of dingy green-brown colour. So not only will it change the colour on there, the hue on there, it'll also, represent a nice bit of dirt and grime. And then just a very sparing couple of dots of the buff. The lighter coloured oils are very, very powerful. And if you put too much of them on, they're just going to wipe out everything else that you've popped on there. And now we're about to see why I should have primed the miniature. So once that's on there, and that's about the largest area I would work on at any one time, I'm going to get a soft brush, dip it in my mineral spirits, and I'm going to take off most of the mineral spirits on there. So you can see there my brush is pretty dry. There's not much coming off there. We're certainly not washing the surface with it. And then gently, we're just going to start moving the oils around. Ideally, we'd move them around sort of top to bottom. And what that will do is start to create some streaks. I'm going to try and do that, but also if there's areas where I can't, I'm not going to worry about it. I'm just going to smoosh them around a bit and just discolour the panels. You can already see the effect it's having, just makes them look so much more interesting. And you may also be able to see, if it's in focus enough, here it looks pretty good. I'm starting to remove the paint, which is not intentional, the paint underneath. So when we airbrush paint onto a model, and I wanted to leave all this in because it's, it is a mistake, and I think it's important to understand why it's happened. It is nothing to do with me using mineral spirits or those interacting with the acrylic paint. What has happened is I've sprayed very, very thin layers of paint, the acrylic paint, onto the miniature, so the browns. And now I'm rubbing that paint with, albeit a soft brush, but it could be a softer brush. And what that's doing is quite simply just removing the paint. If I had water on that brush, it would be doing exactly the same thing. Whereas if we had primed the miniature, it would have given those thin layers of paint a little bit more to cling to, so they'd be a little bit tougher. To work around this problem, all I did was give the miniature a very sort of slight gloss varnish, not too glossy, and then finish doing the rest of it. That would slightly protect the paint underneath it, and I switched to a much, much softer brush to do the rest of the oil dot filtering on there. But you can see where it's happened all in there. I'm not stressed about that. I'm going to cover that up with some chipping later. It's not going to derail the project or anything like that at all. But you can see on this side where I use that softer brush and it's got that sort of almost satin finish. We haven't had any of those issues. But what's more important is look how cool the colour is now. Now that we've done that filtering on there, I think it looks just so much more interesting. Something I really, really enjoy. And for the green panels, not many of them, all I've added in is an olive green colour. Now, really, you can do any colours you want with this dot filtering, so have some fun. I try and sort of match the main colour and then do a darker and a lighter version. If you don't fancy using oils, I'm going to pop a link up here. I did all of the techniques, all of these, plus the washes and stuff we're going to do in a bit. I did them all just using Games Workshop acrylic paints as well. So if for any reason you don't want to work with the oils, but you like this effect, you can absolutely do it with acrylic paints as well, if you want to. Will it look exactly the same? No. Will it look really cool? Absolutely. Now, once that's dried, and I've left that for, I don't know, an hour or so, walk the dog, have some lunch, whatever, I give the miniature a good couple of coats of gloss varnish. This is Vallejo polyurethane gloss I've used here. It's just the gloss I like to use because I'm used to it, used to its properties. And at this stage, I'm going to apply my decals, and I'm also going to do some oil pin washing. So the gloss allows me to do both those things at once. So it's why, sort of from an army painting perspective, I think it's quite efficient. So we're going to make up an oil wash here now. So we're not going to put the oil neat onto the model. We're going to create a wash with it first. I've used sepia here, I think, whatever the the tube was I showed you a second ago on screen, just a dark brown. And then I'm adding in some mineral spirits to create a wash. Now, a few of you have asked, oh, how thick is the wash? Can you show us it on a piece of paper or something else? I can, but it doesn't really work the same when I show you it on a piece of paper. So for what it's worth, I want this wash to colour the panels, but I don't want to have to do loads of cleanup work. So I don't want it super thick and slop it all over. So that's the mixture I've made up at the minute. I'm going to try it on a few areas in the miniature, and then I'll adjust that mixture depending on if it's doing what I want it to do. For me, there is no one size fits all. Sometimes I want to use a very, very thick concentrated oil wash. At other times, I basically just want it to be a filter, almost like an oil glaze. Wash, glaze, all these terms, they're just different dilutions of paint, and they're going to change depending on what you want them to do. So unfortunately, I can't just give you a direct ratio. But they're very, very forgiving. You can work backwards and forwards with them. It's not something that you need to sort of stress about getting right the first time. So for me there, it wasn't dark enough where it was in the recesses. It wasn't concentrated enough. So I've added a little bit more of the oil into the mix. And then we're good to go again. Now I'm using a brush with a decent point on. This is a natural hair brush I'm using here, but it's not a very good one. So it's just my oil brush at the moment. But generally when you're using your oils, because you're going to be using the solvents to thin them with, it will damage your natural hair brushes. And then once it's dry, I left this overnight actually, but after about an hour with these Absalons, it's good. You might have a few little deposits where you don't want them, where the oil has settled. And you'll particularly get this if you either apply loads of it in one place or if you use quite a dilute mix like I did, and it will pool in certain areas. All you need to do is go in with a clean brush, and you can just kind of buff it out and blend it into the rest of the miniature. Oils are very rarely like a one and done type thing. There's just a little bit of work to be done. So you can see there where it's sort of formed a line, it's separated out from the panel rather than going into the recess there. And that's because I had quite a dilute mix, and I obviously applied it on there relatively thickly, but because of gravity, it's pulled a lot of that mixture down into that area. So it's pooled. And then as the mineral spirits have sort of created that tiny little bubble, almost droplet, as that has evaporated, the pigment has moved out to the furthest edges of that as it's evaporated, and that's why it's left it further into the panel rather than in the recess. So all it is a case of just buffing it. As you can see here, I'm just sort of doing tiny circles to buff it in there. If the oil's not moving at all, you can slightly wet the brush with some mineral spirits just to get them working again. And then once I was happy with all that cleanup work, I wanted to give the model its final finish. So this is a 50-50 mix of MIG matte and MIG ultra matte varnish. It's just what I like at the minute. You pick whatever finish you like on your model. Then it was time for some battle damage. I didn't want to do tons on this because partly I love doing it and can get very absorbed in it. And trying to remember this is army painting, so I want it to look good, but I also don't want it to take forever. Ideally, I'd want this Sentinel to be done in 2 painting sessions, which I think this is eminently achievable, and that will only get more efficient the more miniatures you're doing at the same time. So here I'm using Rakarth Flesh, which was our highlight colour when we did the airbrushing. But because we've changed the colour of the surface so much, we can use it now as our chipping colour because it's much, much lighter. So I sponged it on initially to give me a nice broad range of sizes of chips, nice and random effect. And then any areas that I want to accentuate further, or any areas that I couldn't get to with the brush, the sponge rather, I would just go in with my paintbrush with the Rakarth Flesh and just expand them out a little bit. And it probably took me, 5 minutes, that step altogether. And then the areas where I've chipped the paint physically off the model, which I didn't mean to, and revealed the plastic, Here I'm just applying some dark rust, which is just a nice dark brown colour, just to create some more corroded chips on the miniature. I'm also going to base coat the exhausts with this colour as well. If you wanted to, you could go and do loads of those brown chips all over the model as well, but I'm trying to be restrained with this one. And then the chipping on the green parts, I've used Elysian Green, which again is that the lighter colour that we airbrushed. Frustratingly, I got it wrong with which way up the rocket pods went, and I've highlighted them and everything the wrong way round. And when I came to glue them on the model, I was really annoyed because underneath there's loads of lovely chipping and highlighting, and you can't see any of it, but you know, it's the way it goes. And then to highlight the exhaust there, you saw me, I'm just stippled on a little bit of Mournfang Brown, which is a nice orangey brown. So those exhausts now look like nice, rusty old steel, which is exactly what we wanted. And then for the very, very few parts on this model that I want to be actually metallic, I'm just going to base coat them black. So it's a couple of the pistons, and then the solar symbol on the front, and then just the little surround to the view hatch. I know the solar stuff has loads of often brass, copper, bronze banding on it, and I know it's part of the scheme for a lot of them, and it's also in the lore. You know, they got them to polish that and clean that between campaigns to keep the soldiers busy and stuff. It's just not quite the look I want on my models, but a little concession to that I thought was cool because it's a Warhammer model. It's not a military, you know, it's not a real world military miniature, so it's nice to get a little bit of metallic in there. I think it always brings it back to Warhammer for me, having some metallics on there. So I've base coated it using Scale 75 Decayed Metal. I've mixed in a little Brass Scorpion by Games Workshop there, and then I've mixed in a little Moonstone Alchemy to that Brass Scorpion to create a final highlight. And you can see I'm just sort of stippling it on just to create a nice bit of texture on the metal, make it look a bit scratched up. And then I'm using Moonstone Alchemy on its own just to do a few little chips and highlights along the edges. And for the solar symbol, I think I used Necro Gold by Scale 75, but I mean, it's so tiny and minimal, it really doesn't make a blind bit of difference. So it's all good. And then the pistons, I've taken my brightest silver colour, which for me is Vallejo Model Air Steel, and I'm going to try and paint them in as smoothly as possible. And the easiest way I found to do that is to use the paint undiluted and sort of paint it, I don't know how to describe it, like I'm doing there, and I just move around the piston. And then the final stage before we go into some more oils is I wanted to create sort of gunked up grease down in the ball joint at the bottom where the feet attach to the legs. So I've taken Typhus Corrosion here, and the colour is nice, but what I'm really wanting it for is those little bits of gunk that is in the mix to put texture, physical texture onto those surfaces, so it looks like, you know, if I remember back to, you know, working on the farm and stuff, you look on your tractors and machinery like that, and the areas that you would really grease up, they would have, you know, that real thick kind of texture on them. Now we're going to use, or I'm going to use an enamel product here. Enamels work similar to oils in the sense that we need mineral spirits to dilute them and move them around. But the reason I'm using this one is because it has a particularly glossy finish, and I just wanted this to represent the grease around the pistons. So quite simply, I've just washed it on really and tried to pull it down towards the areas where the pistons actually move in and out. And then I've discovered I had an oil called engine grease, which is basically exactly the same thing. It's just an oil paint. So they've both got a nice glossy finish. They are slightly different. Enamels and oils do go on differently. Obviously, the benefit with the oils is I can choose the dilution of it, which is great. But I love using enamels as well. I just don't use them that often in the videos because they take longer to dry. And when it comes to filming, you know, I've often got to get a whole miniature done every week. That additional drying time can muck about in my scheduling. But I love using enamels, but they do stink. Yeah, they're just a different thing. Maybe we should use them more in some videos soon. It might be fun. But yeah, so just putting this around the sort of, I think that's the engine compartment up there probably, and down around those ball joints at the bottom of the feet. And then the last oil, or nearly the last oil here, is just called Light Rust. And I'm just popping this over the exhaust just to add a bit more interest into there as well. And then I'd use some Bitume here to do the infantry miniature. And I thought, oh, it's a nice dark sort of purpley brown. I might just pop a bit extra of that here and there on the miniature just to bring a bit more definition and dirt and grime in. And then I stopped myself because I realised I was just fiddling and I didn't need to be doing this. I'm just doing it because I enjoy it. The last part for the detailing is the lenses. Now, I'm going to use some products here by Tamiya. These are their clear paints. I love them. I know some people are a little put off using Tamiya because it's a solvent-based paint. It does smell. Maybe they're not so confident. You can get water-based clears. Citadel do a few of them. Vallejo do a few of them. They won't give you the same effect as these Tamiyas. So I would say if you really like this look, and it is, I think, quite Marmite. Some people love it and some people don't. I love it. But if you do like this look, just pop out and pick up those Tamiyas. They'll last you forever, you know. And because you're not airbrushing them or anything like that, there's no smell really, and you're only using them for a few minutes. So what we want to do is get the lens really, really bright. So I've used that steel color again, and then we're trying to apply a nice thick blob of the clear paint, and it's just gives us a lovely shiny lens. Because they're solvent based, we need to thin them or wash your brush with isopropyl alcohol, which is what I've got in that little dish there. Not mineral spirits, that's isopropyl alcohol. And you'll notice I'm trying to show on my brush. I try and get, if I can get it in focus, I try and get a nice blob of the paint at the bottom of the brush, and I am, despite what the angle looks like on screen, I am coming down at that miniature now directly from above. And what I really want is the blob of paint to just sort of wick off the brush and pool itself nicely over that lens. The two lenses on the sides here are domed, which is great for this. When you get that, it just spot on. You can do it in one go and it looks lovely. The little one in the middle is a flat one, which is a touch more awkward to get it going. But if you need to apply it in a few coats, then by all means do. Okay, moving on to the infantry. So the Deathless, really, really cool regiment cohort, Solar Auxilia, cracking scheme, a white scheme. So they feature heavily in the Beta Garmin campaign. So over a black primer, I've chosen to base coat the miniature using dark sea grey. Any grey will do, to be honest with you. This is just what I had to hand. And then there are white fatigues and white armour plates on this miniature. So what I've done is taken Tamiya flat white, thinned it quite heavily, probably... You can see there on the cork, probably 3 drops of Tamiya X20A thinner for every drop of paint. A nice thin mix. And I'm spraying down on the miniature here almost from directly above. So I want to leave some of that grey just in the lower edges of the folds of the thing. I'm sorry about the flickering I'm noticing as I'm doing the audio here on this. I might have to figure out what's going on with the lamps. There's been a bit of flickering in some of these clips, so apologies for that. It's not too distracting. So just coming down directly from above onto them. And then when it comes to the armor panels, I'm trying to do a slightly more extreme highlight. So on the shoulder pads, I've sort of picked the apex and done a nice bright one there. And then on the helmet, again, I'm kind of lighting it from above, a nice sort of spherical highlight on the front of the helmet, but leaving quite a lot of that grey in the shadowed areas. And the reason there is simply to push the idea that this is, you've got fabric and then you've got metal. So just wanted them to look slightly different. Once that was dry, I'm using Citadel Apothecary White, which is a contrast paint. So just applying that over the material, the fabric rather, on his undersuit. Again, just to try and change it a little bit from the armour being white as well. Then I give the whole model a couple of coats of polyurethane gloss varnish. And this is so I can do my decals, but I'm also going to do a little oil wash as well. So to differentiate the armour a little bit further, I'm going to use an oil wash on it. Now, this is called Payne's Grey. That Payne's Grey is by Absalom 502, and it's very, very blue. Now, Payne's Grey isn't a colour; it is isn't a specific colour. Like it's a dark grey blue, created by some bloke called Payne. It's a really, really cool colour, but it does vary quite a lot from manufacturer to manufacturer. So the Payne's Grey I tend to use is the Winsor & Newton Artisaur colour one, which is a much more grey than blue. But I didn't mind the blue on this. So just a little bit of that Absalom 502 Payne's Grey, just washing that onto the helmet and onto the shoulder panels as well. And I was really happy with this. For me, this is a nice little point of difference between the armour and the fatigues, and it matters to me. It might not matter to you, in which case just do them both the same. But I enjoy doing it. Once the decals and that was all dry, I'll link up how to do decals in the top. I give the model 50-50 coat of matte and ultra matte varnish. The decals for this were found on the Legions Imperialis Solar Auxilia vehicle sheet. And one of the downsides when we do a lot of white on the miniature is we're going to need to black out the other details. And we need to be quite careful and accurate here. So I'm just going around with my current favourite black paint, which is Vallejo Model Colour Black, and just doing all the panels, or basically everything that's not the white bits, blacking them out. And then for the chips on the armour panels, I'm using Skavenblight Dinge. And I'm using this because it's just a slightly manky grey colour. So rather than it just being a straightforward grey chip, this is just a bit grungier. And I like it. To be honest with you, at this scale, at this size, all the rest of it probably doesn't make any difference, but in my head it does. So that's why I'm doing it. And I'm just chipping around the very edges with my brush. I don't think you need to sponge chip this. It's going to take you all of 2 minutes, if that, to do the entire miniature. And then for any of the black leather parts that are on there, so his boots and his gloves, I'm using a scale 75 petroleum grey here to just do a quick highlight on all of them. Again, just to make that black leather look different to the black armour panels. For any of the little straps on there, I'm using Thondia Brown, just to, again, just add a little bit of extra colour on the miniature, and again, help to differentiate the parts that are on the model. God, I said differentiate a lot, haven't I? Let's have a look at my Thesaurus. And for the chipping on the white parts of the armour, I'm using white. Again, currently, my favourite one available is Vallejo Model Colour White. That's what I'll use till we've got our white available. So, but yeah, I'm chipping along the edges, and I'm also making sure to put a few little chips across the decals just to help sell that effect that they are painted onto the armour a bit more. They're not just stickers. But again, just, probably less than a minute to do all of that chipping. And then a tiny bit more chipping on the armour panels. I wanted to use a nice bright silver, so this is Model Air Steel I'm using here. And I was just following the colour plate that's in the Solar sort of Army List book that you can get. Can't think what it's called now, but it's part of the gaming books for Heresy. There's a little just one tiny colour plate of these guys, which is what I'm basing this scheme off. And I think it's very, very effective, this bright silver chip as well. You still see plenty of that grey showing through as well, but just a few ones of these will make a nice impact, I think. Don't worry about the fact that the other bits on the miniature are done differently. Sometimes when I'm filming, I have to do things in a slightly different order than how I would do them when I paint, but when I show you the order I'm painting them in the video, that's the order I would do them if I was doing the miniature. For the other parts of the model, so I'm base coating them in scale 75. I'm then going to do the piping and those bits with scale 75 Necro Gold, which is a nice sort of green gold colour. And this is just to make that look different to the bronze colour that I'm going to choose to do the rifle and the life support system. So for that, I'm going to use Runelord Brass by Games Workshop. Lovely, lovely pale pinky brass colour. Really, really like this. And I think it's pretty close to what we see in a lot of the colour plates for the Solar. Certainly been my favourite favourite sort of little recipe I've discovered whilst doing the Solar. Once that's dry, give it a wash of Poxwalker, which is a shade paint by Games Workshop. Again, it just gives it this lovely patina. Really different, really unusual. Yeah, I love it. Absolutely love it. For the parts that we did with the Necro Gold, we're going to give them a Coelia Greenshade wash. Again, to suggest some oxidization of the metal, but make it different to the other one on there. So across the model, you've got lots of pairs of very similar colours. You've got white armour, white fatigues, you've got black gloves, black armour. You've got different sort of bronzy brass colours on there. So for me, I think it's different to try and make, I think it's important to try and make them look a bit different. Then anything silver, just done with Iron Warriors and given a little wash of Ratling Grime. Ratling Grime is a contrast paint. I've just thinned it with a little water, and that behaves a lot more like a traditional sort of acrylic wash paint. And once all of that is dry, I'm going to give the entire model a wash with an oil paint. This is called Bitume. It's by Absalom 502. It's like a nice purpley brown colour. This is you can see it's very thin this mixture. So it's just kind of tinting all the colours on here, which is exactly what I want it to do. Just grunges it up a little bit, gives it a slight tint. And I went slightly heavier on the fatigues as well, or the boiler suit, whatever it's called, that he's got underneath his armour plates. Because again, in the colour plate, they show quite an accumulation of dirt and grime on that. And yeah, I love how that's done. And then final finishing touches, much like the Sentinel, we're going to do some nice clear lenses. So bright silver on there first, and then I'm going to use clear green here for this guy's lenses, because I thought that was a nice contrast to the rest of the model. And, you know, red is, I'm still in the camp of red is for bad guys, and these are good guys, so they get green lenses. And there we go. That's the pair of them done. I've just done the bases up like I normally do. I'll pop the link up in the top to the video, just specifically on basing. Yeah, very, very, very happy with how these have come out. I always know when I've enjoyed doing something for one of these videos, when I wish I could have had more time and done more on them. Both these schemes, I think, have huge potential to be took umpteen steps further and really sort of look pretty special on display. But I also think from a gaming point of view, I think they will look awesome on the tables. I hope you've enjoyed perhaps the slightly different look that we've gone for, particularly on the Sentinel, than perhaps what we typically see when we're gaming with Warhammer miniatures and stuff. But it's something I really enjoy, and this range is a great opportunity to play around more with that. I think the Deathless scheme, the Solar scheme in particular, yeah, I really enjoyed this. I was fairly certain I was going to do a small Chthonian Headhunters force, and these guys have really thrown a spanner in the works there. If I was going to be ultra critical of it, I think I made the highlights on the helmet a little bit too small, a little bit too tight, so I've left too much of that shadow colour in there. So for me, possibly doesn't read quite as white as I would like it to. And again, that's why, you know, test models are really important if you're going to do a big army. So if I do go ahead with these guys, that's the only thing I think I would change, is make that slightly broader. I am really happy, though, with how the white armour looks different to the white boiler suit. So that was a good success with that one. Again, with the Sentinel, it's just, I think as soon as you stop painting everything metal as bare metal, it rapidly, you know, drastically changes the look of the model. And for me, that look is just... It's perfect. That's exactly how I want it to look. I say a lot of the solar stuff is grey rather than this tan colour, and I would do exactly the same process. I would just pick a couple of greys and do that, and then go again, and it would look fantastic. I only say that because when I'm gonna paint the tank in a few weeks' time, I might well be painting it in the green scheme that I did for my solar in Legions Imperialis. I quite fancy seeing what that'll look like, biggerized. On it, so we'll see with that. But I hope you have enjoyed more solar videos. It was a really lovely response to the last one. I know they're quite niche, but again, I hope, as usual, there's little bits that you can maybe apply to whatever project you're currently working on with your painting. And if there are any more schemes you'd like me to do, please let me know in the comments. You know, I love doing them. It's not really a chore for me, you know, and I like sharing them and giving people perhaps a jumping off point to do with it. I haven't mentioned in this video so far, but I just want to say thank you very much to all of you that support us over on Patreon. It makes a massive difference to myself and Andy. You've got videos over on there most weeks. You've got videos here most weeks as well. It allows us to both do it full time, and it's allowing Cult to grow and, you know, create things like the paint range that's coming out and the MPO and all that sort of stuff. So we really, really do appreciate it. If you can't support us on there for whatever reason, like, subscribes, comments, all the rest on these videos, again, make a massive difference. And I genuinely appreciate all of them. I read them all, and I always try and reply to those that I can. So yeah, as usual, any questions, pop them down in the comments. I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Take care. I'll see you next time. If you've liked any of the models in this video and you fancy having an army of them yourself, but perhaps you don't have the time or wherewithal to get it done, consider dropping us an email at commissions@cultofpaint.com, and maybe Ben can sort you out.